Find whoever's been hiding wounded wolves. The command thundered across the royal barracks before sunrise. Every soldier in the lower courtyard straightened immediately as Alpha King Kalor Vyre descended the war platform with cold fury written across his face. For 3 months, the same problem kept returning. Execution transports sent into the northern territories arrived empty. Not attacked, not destroyed, just abandoned. The wolves inside vanished without a trace. And somehow, days later, those same wolves resurfaced stronger, healed, and violently protective of whatever secret sanctuary sheltered them. Kalor stopped beside the strategy table while commanders unrolled fresh reports. 3 more transport guards found unconscious near the eastern ravine. One captain reported carefully, "Dead? No, Your Majesty." That answer worsened Kalor's expression, because mercy complicated things. Mercy suggested intention. "Speak clearly," Kalor ordered. The captain swallowed once. They were treated. Silence settled heavily across the room. Another commander pushed several blood-stained reports across the table. Their wounds were cleaned professionally. Infection prevented. One soldier claimed someone stitched a torn artery before leaving. Kalor stared down at the reports. Not executions, not rebellion, healing. That made this dangerous in an entirely different way. "Whoever's doing this," another officer muttered, "is helping rogue wolves recover and return to the wild." Kalor's gaze sharpened instantly. "And my soldiers?" The room hesitated. Finally, "Also treated." That answer landed harder than expected, because enemies usually left corpses behind, not survivors. Kalor looked toward the northern map spread across the table. Red markings covered half the forest territories. Missing transports, disappearing wolves, sightings of injured rogues, returning healthier than before. Someone had built an underground network beneath the kingdom's nose. And worse, the wolves trusted them enough to keep returning. One elder commander crossed his arms tightly. "The rogues refuse interrogation. None of them will reveal the healer's identity." Kalor's voice dropped lower. "Then they're protecting someone." No one argued, because it was obvious now. Whatever waited in the northern forest had become important enough for rogue wolves to suffer torture without speaking. That alone made the threat serious. A young tracker suddenly entered the war chamber, breathing hard from the ride. "We found another trail." Kalor turned immediately. "Where?" "North Forest border, near the frozen river paths." The tracker placed a torn piece of cloth onto the strategy table. Kalor picked it up slowly. Simple fabric, stained with dried wolf blood and crushed herbs. Healing herbs, fresh ones. The scent trail leads deeper into the northern woods. The tracker continued carefully. "There's likely a hidden cabin somewhere beyond the cliffs." One commander scoffed quietly. "A single healer causing this much disruption?" Kalor's expression remained unreadable. "No," he said calmly. "Someone earning wolves loyal enough to defy death itself." Silence followed instantly, because every person in the room understood the danger in that. Loyalty built through fear eventually collapsed, but loyalty built through kindness, that became something far harder to destroy. Kalor closed his hand around the blood-stained cloth, then looked toward the northern territories beyond the palace walls. Cold forests, hidden trails, secrets buried beneath snow. "Prepare the riders," he ordered. The commander straightened immediately. Kalor's eyes darkened slightly as he gave the final command. "This time," he said quietly, "I'm hunting the traitor myself." And somewhere far beyond the kingdom, deep inside the northern forest, a wounded wolf lifted its head suddenly, as if it already sensed the king was coming. Snow cracked beneath the horses' hooves as Calor led the royal riders deeper into the northern forest. The trees thickened with every mile, dark, silent, watching. Even the soldiers behind him had stopped speaking. Only the wind moved through the frozen branches overhead. The tracker riding ahead finally raised his fist. Here, Calor looked toward the narrow clearing hidden between cliffs and immediately saw it. A small cabin buried beneath heavy pine shadows. Smoke drifted weakly from the chimney. Fresh tracks circled the entrance. Wolf tracks, too many to count. Calor dismounted first, one hand already resting near the sword at his side. "Surround the cabin," he ordered quietly. The soldiers obeyed instantly. Steel flashed between the trees. Boots crushed frost beneath heavy armor. But no one attacked, because something felt strange here. Not dangerous, peaceful. Calor reached the cabin door and kicked it open himself. "I know you're inside." Silence answered first. Then warmth hit him. Not fire warmth. Life. The cabin smelled strongly of herbs, medicine, and wolf blood. Shelves lined the walls, covered in dried plants and glass bottles. Bandages soaked red hung drying near the fire. And across the small room, wolves rested, injured wolves, sleeping peacefully beside one another instead of snarling like beasts waiting for death. Calor's expression hardened immediately. At the center of the room, a young woman knelt beside a wounded gray wolf, carefully wrapping its injured leg. She didn't scream when soldiers entered, didn't panic, didn't even stand immediately. Instead, she finished tying the bandage first. Only then did she slowly look up. Exhaustion sat heavily beneath her eyes. Her clothes were simple, worn, stained with blood and herbs. But her expression remained calm despite 10 armed soldiers surrounding her cabin. One guard pointed immediately. "Your Majesty, that's the traitor." The woman glanced toward him briefly, then back to the injured wolf resting beside her. Calor stepped farther inside. "You've been hiding rogue wolves against the crown." The woman rose slowly to her feet. "I treated injured creatures." Cold silence followed. Calor's gaze sharpened. "Those creatures killed royal soldiers, and your soldiers burned half the eastern forest hunting them." Several guards stiffened immediately. The woman didn't sound afraid, just tired. Calor studied her carefully. No visible weapon, no defensive stance, only exhaustion and stubborn calm. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elira. You admit helping rogues?" Elira glanced around the cabin quietly, at the sleeping wolves, at the fresh bandages, at the frightened young brown wolf hiding beneath the table. Then she answered, "I admit refusing to let wounded things die slowly." Something about the wording unsettled him unexpectedly. Before Calor could respond, a low growl rolled through the cabin shadows. Every soldier turned instantly, then froze. A massive black wolf emerged slowly from the darkness behind Calor. The royal wolf, his wolf. The beast ignored every soldier completely, ignored Calor too. Instead, it walked directly toward Elira. The room held its breath. The wounded wolves lowered their heads immediately as the massive creature approached. Elira remained perfectly still. Then suddenly, the royal wolf lowered itself before her, one knee touching the wooden floor, head bowed. Submission. Shock exploded silently through the cabin. One soldier whispered hoarsely, "That's impossible." Calor stared at his wolf in disbelief, because the royal wolf bowed to no one. Not elders, not generals, not kings. Yet somehow, it knelt before the woman accused of treason, and Elira looked just as shocked as everyone else. The cabin remained frozen in silence. No one moved. No one even seemed willing to breathe too loudly, because the sight before them made no sense. The royal wolf still knelt before Alira, with its massive head lowered in complete submission. Kalor stared at the beast in disbelief. His wolf had stood beside him through wars, executions, and territorial battles without ever bowing to another living creature. Yet now, it lowered itself willingly before a healer accused of treason. One nervous soldier reached for his weapon. "Your Majesty!" The wolf growled instantly, violent, warning. The sound shook the cabin walls, hard enough to rattle hanging glass bottles. The soldier stepped back immediately. Kalor narrowed his eyes. "Stand down." Usually that command ended everything. Tonight, the wolf ignored him. A dangerous silence followed. Kalor slowly stepped closer to Alira. The wolf immediately shifted between them. Protective. Again, the reaction hit harder than outright aggression would have, because it meant trust, loyalty, choice. Kalor's expression darkened slightly. "What did you do to it?" Alira frowned faintly. "Nothing. That wolf obeys only me." Her eyes moved toward the massive creature standing beside her. "Then, maybe it's choosing something else right now." The answer unsettled him more than he expected. Kalor studied his wolf carefully. The beast wasn't acting controlled or manipulated. If anything, it looked calmer near Alira than it had in months. That realization bothered him deeply. "You know this wolf," Kalor said slowly. Alira hesitated once, then nodded. "It came here during the first winter storms." Several guards exchanged confused looks immediately. Kalor's voice sharpened. "Impossible. My wolf never leaves the royal grounds alone." Alira looked directly at him. "It did, after someone buried silver traps through its side." Silence crashed through the cabin. Kalor froze. Silver, the one metal capable of weakening royal wolves permanently. "That's a lie," one commander snapped immediately. Alira ignored him completely. "It could barely walk when it arrived," she continued quietly. "Fever, blood loss, torn muscle around the ribs." Kalor's expression changed instantly, because now he remembered. 3 months ago, the wolf vanished for nearly 2 days after returning from the eastern border conflict. The generals claimed it suffered minor injuries during patrol. Minor. Alira crossed her arms tightly against the cold cabin air. There was nothing minor about it. Kalor turned slowly toward his commander. The man shifted nervously. "Mistake," Kalor noticed immediately. "You reported shallow wounds," Kalor said coldly. The commander swallowed hard. "Your Majesty, the battlefield situation was unstable. We didn't want panic spreading through the army." "So you lied." "No, we controlled information." The correction only worsened the silence. Kalor looked back toward the wolf, standing protectively beside Alira. The beast's scarred side became visible briefly beneath thick black fur. Freshly healed, not old, not imagined, real. Alira spoke again before anyone else could. "It kept reopening the wounds because your soldiers forced it back into combat too early." That landed hard. Hard enough that several guards lowered their eyes immediately, because everyone knew the royal wolf fought beside Kalor personally during border wars. Kalor stepped closer again. This time, the wolf didn't block him completely, but it watched carefully, choosing, judging. Kalor looked toward Alira steadily. "You healed my wolf in secret for months." Alira answered without hesitation. "Yes." "Why?" For the first time, her calm expression cracked slightly. "Because wounded creatures deserve better than being treated like weapons." Silence followed immediately. And, somewhere deep inside Kalor, something uncomfortable began shifting. Kalor returned to the capital before dawn. The ride back was silent. No one dared speak after what happened inside the forest cabin. Not after watching the royal wolf openly defy command for Elira. Not after learning silver traps had nearly killed the king's wolf, while military reports claimed only minor battlefield injuries. And especially not after seeing the expression on Kaelor's face during the journey home. Cold, controlled, dangerous. The moment the palace gates opened, Kaelor ordered the war council assembled immediately. Generals rushed into the strategy chamber, half-dressed from sleep, while servants relit fires across the massive room. Elira stood near the rear wall, beside the royal wolf, still wearing simple healer clothes, still stained with dried blood and herbs. Yet somehow, the room felt more aware of her presence than any noble standing there. Kaelor remained at the center platform, staring down at the military reports spread across the table. One stack official, one stack new. Elira's records. The differences between them were horrifying. You claimed 23 wolves injured during Eastern conflict patrols, Kaelor said quietly. No one answered. He picked up another report. Elira documented 61. Silence deepened. Another page. You reported no silver weapon use against royal forces. Kaelor slammed a blood-stained trap onto the strategy table, hard enough to crack wood beneath it. Elira had brought proof. The room flinched instantly. The commander finally stepped forward carefully. Your Majesty, border negotiations were unstable. If neighboring territories learned our wolves were weakened, you lied to the kingdom. The commander's jaw tightened. We preserved stability. Kaelor's voice dropped lower. You sacrificed living creatures to preserve appearances. No one interrupted, because everyone could now see where this was heading. Elira stepped forward quietly beside the table. The injured wolves weren't even treated properly before being redeployed. Several generals shifted uncomfortably. She continued anyway. I removed infection from bite wounds already turning black. I found wolves abandoned after battles because transporting them slowed military movement. One older councilman scoffed softly. They're animals! The royal wolf snarled instantly, violent enough to shake the chamber walls. The councilman stumbled backward in terror. Kaelor never looked away from the commander. You hid battlefield losses. We couldn't appear weak. You buried injured wolves in forests to die slowly. The commander's voice hardened defensively. They were expendable compared to the throne. That sentence ended everything. Kaelor crossed the room so fast, several guards reacted too late. His fist hit the commander hard enough to send him crashing across the strategy table. Wood splintered loudly. The chamber exploded into chaos. Guards rushed forward. The commander struggled upright, coughing blood, while Kaelor descended toward him with terrifying calm. My wolf nearly died because your pride feared embarrassment. Your Majesty, you forged military records. The commander panicked. I protected the crown. Kaelor grabbed him by the collar sharply. No, he said coldly. You protected yourself. Silence crashed across the room again. The royal wolf moved beside Elira once more. Protective, loyal, watching. Kaelor finally released the commander, hard enough for him to collapse back onto the floor. Then turned toward the guards. Strip him of rank. The room froze. Public disgrace for a royal commander was nearly unheard of. Kaelor's expression never changed. Every falsified report will be exposed before the kingdom by sunrise. The commander stared upward in disbelief. You'd humiliate the military publicly over wolves? Kaelor looked toward Elira briefly, then back at the man on the floor. No, he answered quietly, over betrayal. And, for the first time since entering the capital, the royal wolf lowered its head slightly, toward Kaelor again. Not submission, approval. The public execution platform had never been this quiet. Thousands filled the royal square beneath heavy gray skies, while soldiers dragged the disgraced commander forward in broken ceremonial armor. Chains rattled loudly across the stone. No one spoke, because the kingdom had already heard the rumors. Falsified war reports, abandoned wolves left to die in forests, silver traps hidden from the crown, and worst of all, the royal wolf itself had nearly been sacrificed to protect military pride. Kaelor stood above the crowd beside the throne platform, wearing black ceremonial armor, cold, unreadable. Beside him stood Illyra, not dressed like nobility, no jewels, no royal silks, only a dark healer's cloak and worn leather gloves still carrying faint herb stains across the fingers. Yet somehow, people kept staring at her more than the throne itself, because the royal wolf sat calmly at her feet. Not Kaelor's, hers. The crowd noticed every second of it. Kaelor stepped forward slowly. The commander of the Eastern battalions falsified military reports against the crown, he announced across the square. His voice carried through absolute silence. He abandoned injured wolves and concealed battlefield losses to preserve political appearances. The chained commander shouted desperately from below, "I protected the kingdom." Kaelor's gaze sharpened instantly. "You protected your reputation while living creatures bled for it?" The square remained deathly still. Kaelor turned slightly toward Illyra, then spoke the sentence no one expected. "The wolves this kingdom called dangerous survived because one woman treated them when soldiers would not." Whispers spread instantly through the crowd. Kaelor continued before anyone could interrupt. "She saved wounded wolves abandoned by their own army." His eyes moved briefly toward the royal wolf. "Including mine." Shock rippled visibly across the nobles standing near the platform. The commander laughed bitterly from his chains. "You're elevating a common healer above military officers?" Kaelor descended one platform step. Slowly, dangerously. She showed more loyalty to this kingdom than the men sworn to defend it. Silence crashed down again. The commander finally lowered his head, because there was no surviving public shame like this. Not after the people saw the royal wolf choose Illyra openly. Kaelor gave the final order calmly. "Remove him." Guards dragged the disgraced commander away through the screaming crowd, while citizens erupted into furious shouting. Some demanded prison, others exile, others worse. But Kaelor ignored all of it. His attention shifted briefly toward Illyra, standing beside the throne. She looked uncomfortable beneath thousands of staring eyes. Not proud, not triumphant, just overwhelmed. The royal wolf pressed calmly against her side, as if sensing it immediately. Kaelor noticed that too. Interesting. After the square finally emptied, the palace nobles gathered inside the upper court hall, whispering viciously, "She's common-born." A healer standing beside the throne? The wolf obeys her. That's the dangerous part. Illyra heard enough, while crossing the corridor, to understand exactly how quickly admiration turned into resentment inside royal walls. She paused near one balcony overlooking the lower city. For a moment, she almost looked ready to leave. Then the royal wolf appeared, silently beside her again, loyal, protective, choosing her openly without hesitation. Kaelor approached several moments later. "The palace isn't kind to people who disrupt old systems," he said quietly. Illyra didn't look at him immediately. "I didn't come here for recognition." "No," Kaelor admitted. "That's why they fear you." Finally, she glanced toward him, and for the first time, Kaylor realized the kingdom had not merely discovered a healer. It had discovered someone impossible to control through fear. The palace turned colder after Illyra arrived. Not physically, politically. Every corridor conversation lowered when she passed. Every noble gathering shifted uncomfortably whenever the royal wolf appeared at her side, because the problem was no longer rumor. The problem was visibility. A common-born healer now stood near the Alpha King openly. And worse, the royal wolf chose her repeatedly in front of the entire kingdom. That kind of symbolism terrified powerful people. Illyra learned quickly which nobles smiled honestly and which smiled because the king was watching. Most belonged to the second group. "You should have taken the western corridor," one palace servant whispered nervously one afternoon. Illyra paused near the grand staircase. "Why?" The servant hesitated. "Lady Maurice is in the upper gallery." The name meant nothing at first, until Illyra reached the marble hallway above the royal gardens and saw the woman standing beside the window, tall, elegant, perfectly composed, and immediately familiar. Lady Maurice looked toward Illyra slowly. Recognition flashed across her face instantly. Then came the smile, sharp, cruel. "Well," Maurice said softly, "I was wondering when the forest healer would finally enter my palace properly." Illyra's expression cooled, because suddenly she remembered too. 5 years earlier, the Royal Infirmary Application Hall. Long lines, desperation, hope, and one noblewoman who barely glanced at her records before rejecting them publicly. "You don't belong near royalty," Maurice had said back then. Now the same woman looked her over with obvious disgust. "How interesting," Maurice continued. "You failed to enter the palace through talent, so you arrived through pity instead." Several nearby nobles laughed quietly. Illyra remained calm. "I arrived because wounded wolves needed help. And now you stand beside the throne because a beast likes you." The insult landed deliberately. The royal wolf emerged from the lower corridor almost immediately afterward. Massive black paws, silent against marble floors. The nobles stepped backward instinctively. Maurice did not, but her expression tightened briefly. The wolf moved directly beside Illyra and stopped, watching, judging, protective. Again, Maurice folded her arms tightly. "There's something unnatural about this." Illyra finally looked directly at her. Compassion probably feels unnatural to people who abandoned injured wolves during the southern famine. Silence hit the hallway instantly. Several nobles looked away immediately, because everyone remembered those years. Starving wolves killed to protect hunting estates, while noble families refused sanctuary funding. Maurice's face hardened. "Careful." "No," Illyra replied calmly. "You should have been." The royal wolf lowered its head slightly beside her. Approval. The nobles noticed. Again, Maurice stepped closer, despite the tension filling the corridor. "You may impress common citizens," she said quietly, "but eventually the king will remember what you are." Illyra's gaze never moved. "And what exactly is that?" Maurice smiled thinly. "Temporary." The word echoed unpleasantly between them. For one brief second, something painful crossed Illyra's expression. The wolf noticed immediately. It moved half a step closer against her side with a low, warning growl. Maurice froze, not from fear, from realization. The beast reacted emotionally to Illyra. Not obediently, emotionally. That made this far more dangerous than simple attachment. Kaylor appeared at the far end of the corridor moments later. His eyes moved between them once, then narrowed slightly at the tension in the air. Maurice stepped back instantly into practiced elegance. But Illyra already understood something important. The palace did not fear her because she healed wolves. It feared her because the kingdom's most feared creature trusted her completely. And trust, unlike power, could never be forced. Snow covered the palace terraces by the night of the winter gathering. Golden lanterns lit the royal ballroom, while music echoed beneath towering crystal chandeliers overhead. Nobles filled the hall in silks and jewels, sharp enough to resemble armor. Smiles everywhere, sincerity nowhere. Elira stood near the western balcony, trying not to look uncomfortable beneath hundreds of staring eyes. Tonight marked the first official royal gathering she attended beside Kalor, which meant every noble in the kingdom came prepared to judge her. The royal wolf rested near the throne platform several feet away, watching her constantly, always aware of where she stood inside the room. Kalor noticed, too. "You don't have to stay long," he said quietly beside her. Elira glanced toward the crowded ballroom. Leaving early would only make them talk more. They already talk. That doesn't mean I enjoy hearing it. A faint, almost smile touched Kalor's mouth briefly. Before he could answer, Lady Maurice approached. Perfect timing, perfect posture, perfect cruelty hidden behind elegance. Several nobles followed close behind her immediately. An audience, of course. Maurice lifted her crystal glass gracefully. "To unexpected company," she said loudly. Quiet laughter spread through the ballroom. Elira remained still. Maurice turned toward her with carefully practiced sweetness. "Tell me," she asked, "does healing stray animals now qualify someone to stand beside a king?" The room fell silent instantly. Everyone waited. Kalor's expression darkened slightly beside Elira, but Elira calmly placed her untouched glass onto the nearby table first. "No," she replied quietly. Maurice smiled wider. Then Elira continued, "But compassion apparently qualifies better than cruelty." The silence afterward felt sharp enough to cut skin. Several nobles immediately looked away, because everyone remembered the southern famine years, the abandoned wolves, the closed noble estates, the suffering Maurice ignored publicly. Maurice's smile vanished completely. "Careful," she said coldly. "A servant elevated too quickly often forgets her place." Elira met her gaze evenly. "No, powerful people just grow uncomfortable when kindness succeeds, where status fails." The ballroom tension snapped tighter instantly. Kalor watched Elira carefully now, not because she sounded afraid, because she didn't. Maurice stepped closer, too close. "You should remember," she whispered sharply, "that admiration disappears quickly once the king tires of his newest distraction." The insult landed deliberately, personal, cruel, and before Elira could answer, Maurice reached toward her shoulder. The royal wolf moved instantly, violently. A terrifying snarl exploded across the ballroom as the massive black beast launched between them hard enough to shatter nearby glasses across the marble floor. Screams erupted immediately. Nobles stumbled backward in panic. The wolf planted itself directly in front of Elira. Protective, possessive, furious. Maurice froze completely. For the first time that evening, she looked genuinely afraid. The wolf's growl deepened as she instinctively stepped backward. Kalor rose slowly from the throne platform. Dead silence followed instantly. Every noble watched carefully as he descended the marble steps, one by one, toward Elira, toward the wolf, toward the woman half the kingdom still considered unworthy of standing there. The wolf didn't move from in front of her, didn't calm down, didn't break eye contact with Maurice. Kalor finally stopped beside Elira instead of above her. A deliberate choice. The room noticed immediately. Then Kalor spoke quietly enough for the entire ballroom to hear. "Anyone my wolf kneels to," he said coldly, stands above the people who taught it fear. Maurice's face drained of color instantly, and, for the first time, the nobles realized Illyra was no longer standing beside the throne, temporarily. The ballroom never fully recovered after the wolf's outburst. Music stopped, conversations fractured into nervous whispers, and every noble in attendance understood something dangerous had just happened publicly. The Alpha King had chosen a side. Kaelor stood beside Illyra, while shattered crystal glittered across the marble floor around them. The royal wolf remained directly in front of her, still tense, still watching Maurice carefully. No one dared move too suddenly. Maurice finally found her voice first. "This is absurd," she snapped sharply. "The beast nearly attacked me in the middle of the royal court." "The beast reacted to hostility," Kaelor answered calmly. Maurice stared at him in disbelief. "You're defending her." Kaelor's gaze sharpened instantly. Yes, the single word echoed harder than shouting, because no one inside the ballroom expected such a direct answer. Maurice stepped backward, slowly. "She manipulated the wolf," she insisted desperately. "Everyone sees it." The royal wolf growled low in its throat. Warning. Kaelor didn't even glance toward the beast this time. His attention remained entirely fixed on Maurice. "You spent years teaching this kingdom. Fear passes for strength," he said coldly. Silence spread rapidly through the ballroom. Kaelor continued descending emotionally into honesty most rulers avoided publicly. "And yet, my wolf trusted a healer over nobles sworn to protect it. That landed brutally." Several aristocrats lowered their eyes immediately. Because there was no defense against truth spoken this openly. Maurice's expression hardened with humiliation. "You would shame the royal court over a common-born woman?" Kaelor finally moved half a step closer to Illyra. Deliberate again, visible again. "Yes." The ballroom froze. Illyra looked toward him briefly, clearly surprised by the certainty in his voice. Kaelor noticed, but he didn't take the words back, because somewhere between the northern cabin and tonight's gathering, something fundamental had changed. The kingdom spent years rewarding appearances over compassion, and Illyra exposed it simply by existing honestly. Maurice laughed bitterly. "Careful, Your Majesty. Emotional attachment weakens rulers." Kaelor's expression remained unreadable. "No," he replied quietly. "Cruelty disguised as power weakens kingdoms." The silence afterward felt enormous. The royal wolf slowly relaxed beside Illyra at last, sensing the danger fading. Then, without command, the massive beast lowered itself calmly beside her feet once more, not fully kneeling, but close enough. The nobles noticed immediately. Again, choice, recognition, loyalty freely given, not forced. Kaelor watched the wolf carefully, and, for the first time, he understood something uncomfortable. The beast trusted Illyra because she never demanded obedience from wounded things. She earned trust instead, a concept most royal houses barely understood anymore. Maurice looked around the ballroom desperately for support. None came, not tonight. Too many nobles already sensed public opinion shifting toward Illyra after the military scandal. Opposing her openly now meant opposing the king's wolf too. Political suicide. Maurice realized it seconds later. Her face tightened sharply before she turned away without another word. The ballroom parted instantly as she exited, defeated, humiliated, exposed. Kaelor finally looked toward Illyra once the room settled again. "You handled that calmly," he observed quietly. Illyra exhaled slowly. "I spent years learning angry people hate composure more than arguments." That answer nearly made him smile. Nearly. Instead, Kalor glanced toward the royal wolf resting peacefully beside her, then back at Elira, and quietly asked the question growing harder to ignore. Will you stay beside the throne, permanently? The entire ballroom heard it. And suddenly, silence returned all over again. Spring changed the kingdom faster than anyone expected. The abandoned northern forests reopened first. Then, the eastern rehabilitation grounds. And finally, the royal decree outlawing unnecessary wolf executions spread across every territory beneath Kalor's rule. The kingdom resisted at first. Nobles complained, hunters protested, military officers called the reforms dangerous. But none of them argued loudly once the royal wolf began accompanying Elira publicly through the sanctuaries. Because the message became impossible to ignore, the Alpha King trusted her completely. And somehow, so did the wolves. Elira spent most mornings traveling between sanctuaries, inspecting injured packs personally. The wolves that once hid from royal soldiers now approached cautiously instead of fleeing, not fully trusting, but trying. That alone felt miraculous. Kalor arrived unexpectedly at the northern sanctuary one evening near sunset. No guards, no royal escort, just him. Elira stood near the western enclosure, watching young wolf cubs stumble clumsily through fresh grass while healers replaced old fencing nearby. The royal wolf rested beneath a pine tree close to her feet. It lifted its head immediately when Kalor approached. Not hostile, just aware. Kalor stopped beside her quietly. You built all this in less than 4 months? Elira glanced toward the sanctuary grounds. Workers repairing shelters, healers preparing medicine, recovered wolves resting peacefully beneath trees instead of chained inside military cages. No, she corrected softly. The wolves survive long enough for someone to finally care. The answer settled heavily between them. Kalor watched one injured gray wolf limp carefully across the enclosure before speaking again. The kingdom spent years teaching fear was safer than compassion. Elira folded her arms loosely against the evening wind. Fear controls faster, but compassion lasts longer, Kalor admitted. She looked toward him then. A rare thing now. Not guarded, not defensive, just thoughtful. Kalor noticed immediately. Over the past months, their conversations changed slowly. Less tension, more honesty. Neither spoke about it directly. But the distance between them no longer felt political. It felt personal. The royal wolf rose suddenly and walked toward several young cubs, wrestling near the fence. The smallest cub stumbled directly into its front legs. Instead of reacting aggressively, the massive beast lowered its head patiently, while the cub climbed over one black paw clumsily. Elira smiled faintly at the sight. Kalor caught it immediately, and, unexpectedly, he realized the palace never suited her because she looked more alive here than she ever did standing beside royal walls. She trusts you, he said quietly. Elira frowned slightly. Who? My wolf. Her gaze moved toward the massive black beast resting among the cubs. I never tried controlling it. Kalor nodded once. That's probably why. Silence settled comfortably afterward. Not awkward, not strained, peaceful, something rare for both of them. Finally, Kalor looked toward her carefully. One thing still confuses me. Elira turned slightly. You helped wolves everyone else abandoned, he said, even after the kingdom rejected you repeatedly. A long pause followed. The evening wind moved softly through the sanctuary grass, while distant cubs barked playfully near the trees. Then, Elira answered quietly. Wounded things still deserve kindness. Simple words, but Calor felt them settle somewhere deeper than expected, because suddenly he understood why the wolf chose her immediately. Not because she healed injuries, because she never stopped seeing worth in creatures everyone else discarded, including herself. Summer arrived quietly across the northern sanctuary. The forests had changed. No more burned hunting grounds, no more execution cages hidden beneath military camps. Only open fields, rebuilt shelters, and wolves finally learning survival no longer required fear every waking moment. The kingdom changed too. Slowly, reluctantly, but permanently. Citizens who once supported royal wolf hunts now brought injured strays directly to sanctuary gates. Young healers traveled north, asking Elira for training. Even soldiers began escorting wounded wolves instead of abandoning them after battle. And through all of it, the royal wolf never left Elira's side for long. Tonight, the sanctuary rested peacefully beneath fading sunset light. Young cubs chased each other through tall grass, while distant mountains glowed gold beneath the evening sky. Elira sat quietly near the sanctuary fence, repairing torn medical wraps beside a lantern. Simple work, peaceful work, in the kind of life she once thought impossible. Soft footsteps approached behind her eventually. Calor. No armor tonight, no royal cloak, just dark clothes and tired eyes, carrying none of the distance he once ruled with. He stopped beside her silently for a moment, watching the cubs play nearby. They follow you everywhere now, he observed quietly. Elira smiled faintly without looking up. Food helps. Calor almost laughed. Almost. Then his gaze shifted toward the royal wolf, resting several feet away beneath a tree. The massive beast lifted its head briefly at his arrival before settling again calmly. Years ago, that wolf trusted almost no one. Now it guarded cubs beside healers in open fields without violence. Calor still struggled understanding how completely Elira transformed not only the kingdom, but the wolf itself. He sat beside her slowly near the fence. For a while, neither spoke. The silence felt easy now. Earned. Finally, Calor looked toward her carefully. Do you know why it bowed to you that first night? Elira paused her work briefly. No. Calor's gaze moved toward the royal wolf. It recognized safety. The evening wind softened around them. He continued quietly. Not power, not authority, safety. Elira lowered her eyes thoughtfully. Calor leaned back against the wooden fence behind them. My kingdom spent years demanding obedience through fear, he admitted. Then, one healer walked into the forest and earned loyalty simply by being kind. She looked toward him slowly. That sounds more like an insult toward the kingdom than praise for me. It's both. That answer drew the smallest real smile from her. Calor noticed immediately, and for once, he allowed himself to simply appreciate it, instead of hiding the reaction behind royal restraint. Nearby, one small cub wandered too far from the others before tripping clumsily into the grass. The royal wolf rose instantly. Not aggressive, protective. It gently nudged the cub upright before returning toward Elira again. Then, without hesitation, the massive black beast lowered itself beside her feet, head bowed slightly, choosing her. Again, Calor watched quietly before speaking one final time. Even beasts recognize kindness before kings do. Elira's fingers brushed softly through the wolf's dark fur. The sanctuary remained peaceful around them. No fear, no chains, no cages, just trust, freely given at last. And somewhere beneath the fading summer light, Calor realized the most powerful thing his kingdom was never the throne. It was the woman his wolf chose long before he understood why.